On February 1st, U.S. President Donald Trump disrupted trade relations with the country's three biggest trading partners by imposing a hefty 25% tariff on most imports from Mexico and Canada, along with a 10% tax on all imports from China. In retaliation, Canada's Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, revealed a matching 25% tariffs on $107 billion worth of American goods, while Mexico's president promised a similar position but did not specify the scope or targets. China also condemned the U.S. decision, announcing plans to file complaints with the World Trade Organization and pledging further countermeasures without disclosing specifics. The new U.S. tariffs, announced as Marco Rubio began his first international trip as Secretary of State to Central America, were set to take effect on Tuesday. If implemented, they are expected to significantly impact the USMCA, the global trade system, and the economies of all four countries involved. For those unfamiliar with the USMCA, also known as the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, it is a trade agreement between the United States, Mexico, and Canada. It went into effect on July 1st, 2020, replacing the North America Free Trade Agreement, also known as the NAFTA. Trump followed through on his threat to impose 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada, aiming to pressure both countries to curb fentanyl trafficking and migration. In the previous year, CBP confiscated over 27,000 pounds of fentanyl entering the U.S. Synthetic opioid overdoses have become the leading cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 45, highlighting the severe public health crisis fentanyl poses. CBP's fentanyl seizures have sharply increased in recent years. By the end of August in 2024, CBP has already seized over 19,600 pounds of fentanyl, marking a historic high for seizures in fiscal years 2023 and 2024. In August 2024, total seizures of drugs like cocaine, methamphetamines, heroin, fentanyl, and marijuana increased by 31% from July, with cocaine seizures rising by 113% and methamphetamine seizures by 84%. The executive order includes a provision for escalating tariffs if countries retaliate. Although the tariffs were imposed under the International Emergency Economics Power Act, they would, if made permanent, effectively dismantle the USMCA. Some analysts argue that this move could be the most significant threat to North American trade integration since 1930's Smoot-Hallway Tariff Act, which raised import duties on thousands of goods, including agricultural products, in an effort to protect American businesses and farmers, but ultimately worsened the Great Depression. A few days after President Donald Trump declared a 25% tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico, he decided to postpone the tariffs for 1 month, following announcements from leaders of Canada and Mexico about increasing security at their borders. On Monday afternoon, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau shared on social media that Canada would allocate $1.3 billion to plan to strengthen its borders with new helicopters, technology, and personnel, along with extra resources to combat the flow of fentanyl. This $1.3 billion investment in border security and immigration was first announced by Canada at the end of the previous year. Trump quickly followed up with a post highlighting the issues of fentanyl and stating that tariffs would be quote-unquote paused for a 30-day period to assess whether a final economic deal with Canada can be reached. Earlier in the day, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum announced on social media that Mexico would immediately bolster its northern borders with 10,000 National Guard troops to tackle drug trafficking to the United States, especially fentanyl. In his own post, Trump reiterated that the U.S. would continue border security talks with Mexico, led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. Many analysts agree that if tariffs become permanent, they would likely reduce GDP and drive up inflation in all three countries, with Mexico being the most affected. The Mexican peso and Canadian dollar did dip ever slightly when the White House press secretary confirmed days ago that this would happen on February 1st, although each country's currency did rebound back to normal not long after. The main uncertainty remains whether these tariffs would be short-lived if implemented. If not, the impact might be similar to the threat of repealing the NAFTA in 2016, in turn generating short-term volatility without significant long-term damage. If implemented for a few months, Mexico would likely go into a recession with growth closer to zero in 2025. If the tariffs become permanent, we can anticipate a recession in Mexico and Canada. Higher inflation would impact all three countries, although these effects would be more pronounced in the Mexican economy. In Mexico, a depreciation of the peso around 10 to 20% with a significant risk of overshooting would mitigate some of the tariff impact on exports in the short term. Though it would complicate the nation's central banking easing cycle, Mexico's risk is measured by credit default swaps would increase, and there would be an added risk to the country's investment grade rating. In long term, lower investments in supply chains, manufacturing, and nearshoring would all contribute to lower potential growth, particularly if domestic institutions reform continues inhibiting investor confidence. There is still time to de-escalate a damaging trade war, and it seems that this is what the leaders of Canada and Mexico are hoping for, given the 30-day postponement and added border security from both countries. A stronger North America and a more stable Mexico should still firmly align with U.S. interests, and President Donald Trump's tariff decisions are driven largely by domestic fiscal constraints as he submits his 2025 budget to Congress, with a $1.8 trillion deficit in 2024, adding to the $36.1 trillion in national debt. As of now, it looks like the current administration is seeking new revenue sources while maintaining Trump's 2017 tax cuts. Elon has been making headway from what we can see, utilizing Doge to limit government spending, reportedly canceling out $420 million in contracts within 80 hours. If accurate, this would mean Doge is on pace to reduce around $67 billion annually, which is 3% of Musk's initial target. Tariffs do offer a politically expedited solution, but they may come with severe economic risk. Tariffs will directly impact key industries such as automotive with a $228 billion trade flow, energy at $165 billion, agriculture at $98 billion, electronics sitting at $181 billion, and logistics with $1.4 trillion as of 2025. This will affect manufacturers reliant on North America's supply chain, giving them a choice as far as maintaining company profits and investment interests by increasing consumer price or lowering price and prioritizing the consumers who purchase their products. Mexico's President Sheinbaum and Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau previously stated that they were ready to retaliate and, if true, could escalate into a full-scale trade war, potentially undermining and ending the USMCA. Trade is North America's economic backbone. Nearly 80% of Mexico's GDP and 70% of Canada's depends on it. The USMCA sustains the livelihood of 9 million Mexicans, over 5 million US workers, and 4 million Canadians, so obviously there is a lot to take into consideration, to say the least. So, what are your thoughts on the tariffs? How do you feel about Mexico and Canada's response? Is this any country's fault in particular, or perhaps a byproduct of a larger issue at hand? Feel free to like, share, and comment below. Until next time, as always, stay biased.